So a few weeks ago, I made a video outlining the best implants for all of the attacker mechs. I'm now going to do episode 2 of that, going over all of the scouts. So, Lancer, the only ability implants that you can use are cooldown and jump distance. The jump distance only comes in legendary, gives you 75% bonus. Distance will go from 10 meters to 17.5. The cooldown, you get down to 3.5 seconds. I don't think either one's necessarily the best choice. Like, it is a Lancer, but, you know, under the pretense that you're heavily investing in a Lancer at any point in time. I don't think you really need either of them. Probably you're operating mostly on a surprise attack sort of thing anyway. I don't think you need the jump distance or the cooldown. But if you happen to get it and you're like early game or something like that, feel free to equip it, but don't upgrade it because it's Lancer's obviously not something you're going to want to use late game. Moving on to Slingshot. Yes, I did buy it. Don't ask why. The implants you can use are the classic cooldown and damage. It has a mech-specific damage, but it's no different than the regular damage. Dash distance and dash radius. These are the same implants that Killshot has, and it has the same stats that Killshot has. The only difference is that it does have a rare dash distance implant, which is not too bad if you want to go for that. As far as Slingshot goes, I wouldn't really invest in any epic or legendary implants because you're going to get rid of it, let's be real. So having the rare one and upgrading it a few times might help a little bit, just for the sake of argument. But otherwise, yeah, definitely wouldn't go damage because your damage is going to be low enough as it is. Let's assume that you're going to be using like a maxed out one late game for whatever reason. Maybe you think it's funny. You're not gonna rely on the damage for anything, so the damage is pointless. The distance is probably what you're going to want just for maximum mobility. And of course, the radius is basically an augment on the damage, and there's no point in increasing that either. The cooldown would also be nice. Shadow, cooldown of 8, duration of 12. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, typically in these cases, I like to use my ability implants on the larger number, because I can increase this by a larger number of seconds than I can decrease this. The cooldown of 8 seconds can get down to 5.6. That's like a 2.4 second difference, by the way. Whereas the 12-second duration can get up to 15.6. So that's 3.6 second difference rather than the 2.4 here. Pretty significant. But yeah, typically I go with the duration. On any stealth mech, this goes for Eclipse as well, but we'll get to Eclipse later. Shadow also has a stealth speed implant, which is only legendary. I wouldn't, once again, recommend investing in it because Shadow is not something you're probably going to be using long term. If for whatever reason it is, then keep in mind the stealth boost that you get by default is not listed, but it is 10%. So the implant increases it by 15%. Wow, these guys gotta stop. The implant increases it by 15%, but that is a 15% on top of the initial 10%, adding to 25% total, right? And that might sound like a lot, but while you're in stealth, the base 10% speed boost will get you up to 31.9 kph from your 29 base. And then with the implant, you can get up to 36.25. It's like 4.5 kph increase from a max legendary implant. I would not consider it worth it. You can get further in stealth by using a duration implant. Tengu is where it gets kind of interesting because there's a little technicality with its ability. I'm not sure how many people know this, but there is a way that you can make Tengu in permanent stealth where literally there is no point in which it is not in stealth if you just keep spamming the ability. That's by getting the cooldown as low as possible and increasing the stealth duration as much as possible, which is very useful. No other mech can get the perma stealth regardless of whether or not it's just a rare mech. I think it is worth mentioning. So the cooldown, obviously, go for that if you can. That is the first step to the perma stealth build. The classic ability duration implant will only increase your stasis duration, interestingly enough. And there is a mech-specific stasis duration implant that actually increases it by more. Not that either one is useful. I would highly recommend staying away from any stasis duration anything. Rule of thumb, I don't think there's any implant that breaks that rule. Of course, you can use the classic ability damage implant as just an augment on your damage. And there is a mech-specific Sky Strike stealth duration implant, which increases it by 50%, so you can get up to 6 seconds. And you can get your ability with the cooldown implant down to 4.9. That gives you some level of overlap, and for the sake of argument, I did calculate what the cheapest route to getting a perma-stealth build would be, and that would be with a max epic cooldown implant and a level 5 stealth duration. But you definitely need both implants to make it work. Alright, moving on to Killshot. Basically the same thing as Slingshot, except it might be worth using the damage if you really want to. I would also say that the dash distance implant, it would be worth investing in the epic one. Once again, there is only an epic dash distance and there's only an epic dash radius for this mech. There's nothing higher, nothing lower. The radius you can increase by 40% from 12 meters to like 16.8, but I don't think it's worth it. Back in the old days, and I'm talking like very early after, like very soon after global launch, when pilots were new, it was worth it to do that because Killshot was extremely strong. But nowadays, I would not consider that something you should bother doing. I would work on cooldown, distance for maximum mobility, of course, and then the damage if you really want to, but mostly the distance. All dash mechs, I think, benefit the most from dash distance implants, and not anything else. And the reason is because the more ground you can cover in that like 1 to 2 second time frame can really help like jump enemies, catch them off guard, but also cross like dangerous areas as quickly as possible. So yeah, quick recap. Cooldown, damage, distance, radius. The only ones I'd really go for are distance, maybe cooldown. Damage if you want to go full in, but probably not. Redeemer only has one usable implant, and that is the classic ability cooldown. Its ability cooldown base is 14 seconds, which is really, really long. I would definitely recommend using a cooldown implant. The legendary can get you down to 9.8 seconds, which is great. A 10-second ability cooldown is pretty average. That's about how most things are. But even an epic can get you down to 10.8 seconds. So it is worth using an epic if that's all you have. Ability duration does not affect the backtrack timer, by the way. I think this was mentioned in like a dev vlog or something. So yeah, that is the only implant that you could do. I would recommend using it though. Eclipse, similar to Shadow. The duration over the cooldown, it's kind of weapon dependent. You want to figure out what your weapon cycle times are and make sure that, you know, you're optimizing the cooldown and you're optimizing the duration to match your weapon cycle times, the firing time, the reload time, etc. Just to get the most out of that. The specific numbers are the same as Shadow, so I'm not going to bother with that, but it is 1 kph slower than Shadow at base. It still has the stealth speed implant. It has an epic and a legendary, actually, which will get you from like 31 kph while you're in stealth, because remember, you get 10% speed boost when you use the ability, just normally. But then the epic gives you another 10%, and the legendary gives you another 15%. So you can get like 34 to 35 kph from that. With a max legendary implant, I would not consider that to be worthwhile, unless maybe you're pairing it with a duration just to get the absolute most out of it. But even then, I would say it's probably not really worth your time. Surge has 4 implants. You can use the generic cooldown and duration, as well as the dash distance and EMP radius. The cooldown and duration are fine. I would recommend the cooldown over the duration, of course, because the duration only gives you like 1 extra second of EMP time, which most of the time, 4 seconds is more than adequate. The EMP is tied to the ability duration, so ability duration does increase the EMP. This is not the case with like Redox and Tengu, right, where the ability duration is different from the stealth duration, let's say. But in this case, the duration is tied to the EMP and the stealth for Surge, so just a generic cooldown or a generic duration implant will increase both of those. So the cooldown can shave off like 2 seconds, and I think that's slightly more worthwhile. But once again, the distance you can get from 40 meters to like 53, so you can get an extra like almost 13 meters from it, and I think that is definitely worth doing, especially when you have a large EMP radius, an ability as powerful as Surge has. You can ambush multiple people from like an extra 10 meters away without them being able to see you coming. The EMP radius, 15 meters at base. The radius gives you another 30%. It's only a legendary. The legendary is the only one that you get. The dash distance, of course, is an epic. But yeah, the radius will get you to almost 20 meters. But that's 5 meters with a max legendary implant. And I wouldn't consider that to be something worth investing in. Now, I get in a lot of cases, you know, even with like cooldown implants, you're sort of just penny pushing the ability, right? To like get little buffs from it in a lot of cases, but I think the dash distance is just a significantly more useful implant than the radius. For most weapons, you end up using like 3 weapon implants alone, so even if you have a legendary pilot, you only got like 1, maybe 2 implant slots, and I consider distance and cooldown to be the most important. Nomad is the last one. So you got generic cooldown, you got generic damage, which is the same as its mech-specific damage, of course, as they pretty much always are. You got the dash distance, which is a legendary, and that is the only one that you have. And you have the dash time, which is an epic and legendary, and I'll explain what that one's about a little bit later, but it is fairly important. So the cooldown you can shave off like almost 2.5 seconds if you have a max legendary, which is pretty good. I would say that is worth doing. The dash distance is base 45, that's 5 meters more than the dash distance of any other dash mech, and the dash distance implant is 32% at max. That means you can get to 59.4 meters maximum. It's basically 60 meter dash, which is crazy. It's really far and is really useful as someone who has a maxed Nomad legendary dash distance implant. It's crazy how useful that thing is. 60 meter dash is no joke, especially with like the resistance that you get from dashing. You can rush snipers very effectively with this thing. The damage, of course, is just, you know, it's an augment on the damage. So, you know, what you get is what you get. Kind of depends on what you need, but most of the time, ability damage on dash mechs is not really worth going for. The last implant is the dash time. There's an epic and a legendary. The epic is an additional 23%, while the legendary is an additional 50%. So the legendary is more than twice as effective as the epic, which is the case in some of these newer mechs. They've had the newer mechs and weapons. They've had cases like this. Stormrack is one of them. The reload implant is really good, and that's the reason. But anyway, your base dash time is 3 seconds. You can get that up to like 4.5 seconds with the legendary implant. But the thing is that it's not very useful. The chain dash time is separate from the resistance time. When you use your ability, you temporarily take reduced damage, right? That lasts for the base 3 seconds listed here, but it's not listed as an additional stat. It's not tied to the chain dash time, though. And this was mentioned in the mech spotlight as well. from Mech Arena Official. Well, regular duration implants don't affect it at all, but also the dash time implants will not increase the resistance time, which is mostly what you want it for. So having an extra second and a half to do your second dash, which is something that you get only if you hit an enemy, you get that second dash, and you'll get another 3 seconds of resistance, obviously, right? But it's not worth having that extra time for that second dash, because what you're looking for is extra resistance time, which you simply can't get. There's no implant that does that. So I would completely disregard using the dash time implants. If you have them, if you're using them, I would recommend just getting rid of it. You're probably better off having like a level 1 of some random implant. Like a freaking rare ability cooldown is probably more important. It's probably more useful than like a max legendary chain dash time implant. Just being honest, it really is. So yeah, that would be the last of it. Let me know which of these implants you have, or maybe which ones you want to get. Whether or not I told you something that you didn't already know, that's always nice to hear. Let me know if you want me to do another episode on the tanks. But yeah, with that, appreciate y'all. Take care.